How's it going, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, I give my revised CFL mock draft following the results of the NFL draft and all the undrafted signings and whatnot. But really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it, as always, is by hitting like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, everybody. And I also want to remind you that tomorrow night, we're going to be live on this channel for the CFL draft, the entirety of the CFL draft. Hope you guys can come and keep me company for that. And I'm really excited to bring you guys that live stream. And with that said, let's get started. So let's waste no time. Let's get started with Mock Draft 2.0. With the first overall pick, I still have the Edmonton Elks selecting linebacker Tyrell Richards out of Syracuse. I really don't see any reason to change this selection. I think it's been basically set in stone for the last little bit here. He is going to be a great fit in Chris Jones' defense, and potentially Edmonton could switch over the ratio to start a linebacker in that linebacking core, which was pretty weak last season in terms of overall play. So I think Richards going to Edmonton makes a lot of sense here, and I think that will be the pick on Tuesday night. Now with the number 2 pick is where we're going to see some changes. I have the Ottawa Redblacks now selecting defensive lineman Deontay Knight out of Western. And in my previous mock draft, I said I didn't really see a fit for Deontay Knight after the first pick to Edmonton, but I really overlooked Ottawa and the fact that they're probably going to be starting 2 Canadian defensive linemen next season, and they're going to need a lot of depth behind that. And I think Knight is a perfect gamble to do that. He did get invited to a rookie minicamp in the NFL, but I don't think teams are going to be too swayed by that like they are with other players, because I think Knight is more of a tweener kind of guy that doesn't show a lot of wiggle in terms of his athleticism. So I don't think he's necessarily a guy that's going to stick in the NFL long term. I think he may be a guy that we see come to CFL training camp a little bit late, but I think he will be on the Red Blacks roster within the next couple of seasons. So with that in mind, I have the Red Blacks taking Knight instead of Tyson Philpott, who I had there originally. Now, speaking of the Philpotts, at number 3, I have the BC Lions still taking wide receiver Jalen Philpott out of the University of Calgary. I think that even with Tyson Philpott still on the board, I think BC is going to be looking for a guy that's a little more well-rounded in terms of what he brings to the table as a receiver. So I think Jalen, from what I've heard from people that have watched him play, watching what I could of him, I think that he is the guy that is more well-rounded than Tyson. Tyson more of a big play-oriented guy. So I think BC takes a wide receiver here at 3. At number 4, there's not going to be any change here either. I still have the Montreal Alouettes taking defensive back Enoch Makonzo out of Coastal Carolina. I think Makonzo just makes a lot of sense. He's a Quebec-born guy, and he just adds a lot of ability to fill boxes for the Montreal Alouettes in terms of their depth on the defensive side. You got Chris Aki starting in the linebacking core, and then you got Marc-Antoine Dequoy presumably starting at safety. So I think that he's a really great fit to fill the depth in both of those spots, and I think eventually he could become one of those guys that you could call a ratio breaker in the CFL. Now moving to number 5, we have another change. I have the Calgary Stampeders now taking wide receiver Tyson Philpott out of Calgary. I think that with the Philpotts not available to be taken here at number 5 for Calgary in my previous mock draft, obviously we couldn't have taken him, but now with Tyson Philpott falling all the way to number 5 after being selected at number 2 in my previous mock draft, I think that if the Philpotts, either of them are on the board, I think Calgary's going to take them just because they're a local product in terms of being at the University of Calgary. And Calgary does need a little bit more depth in the receiving core. I am high on a couple of their Canadian receivers that they have, but they did lose Hergy Mayala in free agency, which was a pretty big blow to their depth. And I think going forward, Tyson Philpott would be a really good fit to fill that depth role for this team and potentially break out into a starter down the road. At number 6, I now have the Toronto Argonauts taking Daniel Adeboboye out of Bryant University. And I think this is more just a need-filling thing, because originally here I had them taking defensive back Tyrell Ford, who has since been invited to 2 rookie minicamps in the NFL. And so I think that's going to cause him to slide a little bit on draft day. And Toronto, with no really huge glaring needs from a Canadian perspective on their roster, I think they take a good backup running back behind Andrew Harris that can pass block and has a little bit of that all-around ability to really step in a starting role if they need him. And then at number 7, I still have the Saskatchewan Roughriders taking offensive lineman Noah Zaire out of the University of Saskatchewan. And I think this one, again, just makes too much sense. Saskatchewan has a huge glaring need on the offensive line. They need help right now. And I think that Zaire is the most pro-ready guy in this draft class from an offensive line perspective. So I think this makes too much sense, and I have no reason really to change it from my original projection. At number 8, I still have the Hamilton Tiger-Cats as well, taking offensive lineman Zach Pelios out of the University of Ottawa. Again, I think he's a very high ceiling kind of guy in this draft class in terms of all the offensive linemen that are available. And I think with his length and generally pretty raw ability, that Hamilton can really coach him up and potentially turn him into either a tackle or guard at the next level. So I think that is a good fit there for Hamilton. And then at number 9, I still have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers taking defensive lineman Nathan Cherry out of the University of Saskatchewan. And again, I think this is a perfect fit because Winnipeg does not have another Canadian defensive lineman under contract other than Jake Thomas currently for next season. And I think Cherry is the best available defensive tackle in this draft to kind of slide in behind Thomas and really help them in the case of an injury. And I think, again, this makes a lot of sense. I just really like this fit here for that player and the team. So those are my revised selections for the first round. Now moving to the second, where I'm going to give a little bit quicker of analysis here. At number 10, I have the Toronto Argonauts now taking defensive lineman Joshua Archibald out of McGill. Toronto could afford to add another defensive lineman to this group. They have Robbie Smith there that I really like as a prospect, but they didn't really have much else in terms of edge guys. So I think Archibald makes a lot of sense here for the Argonauts. And then the Ottawa Redblacks at number 11, I have them taking defensive back Tyrell Ford out of Waterloo, who slides a little bit here in my projection. I think he's easily a first-round talent and probably a top 5 talent, but the NFL interest is probably going to scare teams off just a little bit, and I think he falls here to the second round. Not too far of a fall, but a fall nonetheless. I think Ottawa's a candidate to take Ford because they don't really have too many glaring needs on this roster, but could afford to add a little bit more upside to that safety and defensive back room for this team. Then moving to number 12, I have the BC Lions still taking offensive lineman Gregor McKellar out of St. FX, and I cannot stress this enough, and I've stressed this in a lot of videos. BC has to walk out of here with a good caliber offensive lineman. I don't think their offensive line woes are going to be fixed overnight because I think they missed their opportunity to do that this offseason with the available free agents, and this is quite frankly just not a great offensive line class. But I think that McKellar is a good candidate to slide down into a guard position eventually, maybe towards the end of his rookie season. Not going to start out of the gate. I don't think any of these offensive linemen, except for maybe Zaire, are going to start right out of the gate, but I think that adding more quality prospects to that room is very important for BC. And then again, Montreal at number 13, I'm still going with offensive lineman Cyril Hogan St. Don out of Laval. He looked really good at the combine, and being a French guy, Montreal just loves drafting those kind of guys. GM Danny Machocha loves taking the Quebec U Sports guys, so I think he's a perfect fit there in the second round. And then Calgary at number 14, a change here. I have them taking defensive lineman Anthony Federico out of Queens. Another team that's going to start multiple Canadian defensive linemen potentially next season. I think they really need to add a little bit more depth. I think Federico has the ability to play the edge position at the CFL level, and I think he could develop quite nicely in Calgary. At number 15, the pick is not going to change. Quarterback Trey Ford out of Waterloo. And Trey Ford did get into an NFL camp, and we're going to see how he performs down there, but I don't think that teams are going to be too scared away by it because it's a mountain to climb when you get to the NFL as an undrafted free agent. So I think Toronto takes him here in the second round. They've had multiple picks here up until this point, so I think that they can afford to take a guy that, they don't really have any pressing needs, so they can take the quarterback and, gamble on Ford's potential here. Now at number 16, it's not going to change either. I'm going to still go with defensive lineman Riley Pickett out of Saskatchewan. I think for the Riders, they need a little bit more depth on the defensive line. Again, the CFL draft, very much about depth. And I think that Pickett is a good candidate, formed quite a tandem with Nathan Cherry the past couple of seasons at the University of Saskatchewan. Being a homegrown guy is going to appeal to the Rough Riders. They love taking chances on those kind of players. And so he's still my pick here at number 16 to Saskatchewan. At number 17, I still have the Hamilton Tiger-Cats taking a receiver, but this time I'm taking wide receiver Samuel Emelis out of Louisiana Tech. And Emelis has been a really fast riser throughout this draft process. Ever since I released that mock draft, I've seen a lot of people actually have him in the first round. I think that the athlete that you're getting here with MLS could be the best athlete in terms of guys that are actually going to come to the CFL from the receiver position from this draft class. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Hamilton to take him. And I think, again, like I said about Keandre Smith, who I originally had him taking in the last mock draft, I think that Hamilton is still looking to round out that receiving room, the Canadian guys in that receiving room, and I think MLS fills that gap. At number 18, I have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers now taking wide receiver Gavin Cobb out of Manitoba, and I think it's easy to see the parallels here between him and Nick Dembski. I think, both coming from the University of Manitoba, and I think that Cobb, with that electric skill set in terms of being one of the better route runners and athletes in this class, is a guy that could really develop very well under the wing of Nick Dembski. Winnipeg also has a need in terms of depth in that receiving core behind Wolitarsky and Dembski, so I think that Cobb fills a big need here for Winnipeg as well. Now finally we have the 2 territorial picks at the end of the second round, starting with Edmonton at number 19. I have them taking offensive lineman Rodeem Brown out of Alberta. I think it makes just too much sense if he's still here on the board. He arguably looked like the best offensive lineman at the Combine. He's going back to school next year, but I think Edmonton has the depth there currently on the roster from a Canadian perspective to wait another year on Brown to come over. And I think that it's really exciting to get a player of his caliber here at this spot with a territorial pick, which is basically a bonus pick here. And then speaking of bonus picks, at number 20, I have the Ottawa Redblacks taking linebacker Jesse Luketa out of Penn State. Luketa actually just got drafted in the NFL in the 7th round, which was a bit later than people expected. I think most people expected him to be like a 4th or 5th round pick, but fell all the way to the 7th round. Almost looked like he was going to go undrafted. I think with him falling in the draft, I think that teams are going to give a lot more consideration to taking him earlier than they otherwise would have, because I think that being a 7th round pick, your chances of falling out of the NFL are a lot higher than if you were a higher round pick. So I'm really excited to see where Luketa goes on draft day and go into the Red Blacks here with a territorial selection. He's an Ottawa-born guy, and I think this is a perfect fit for the Red Blacks. So that is my revised 2022 CFL mock draft. Thank you guys all for watching. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and make sure to come back to this channel Tuesday, May the 3rd at 7 p.m. for the CFL Draft. Really excited to get going with that, guys. And with that said, hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.